Religion. What is it? What makes it important? And why do we still have it? Why did it survive? Well, if you've been listening to the series, Evolution, Past, Present, Future, it all comes to play right here or right now. Simply put, the known religions today are not the only ones that have ever existed. Those are the ones who have survived. There's been loads of other religions, millions, maybe even billions. We have no idea. We have no idea how many there have been. But they're all gone. And the reason why they're gone is because they've been beaten out by all the other religions. Now, I do need to define the word religion to some extent, because it's usually put as just this kind of list of things, and just lists of organizations. But that doesn't make sense from a realistic perspective. You need a better definition than this. What makes a new religion? If I start a religion tomorrow, what makes it a religion? And it seems people go with the idea that it's the size. The size? How is that a defining characteristic? I can understand that with a given size, you can do different things and becomes more popular and then more people defend it. Now, I get that, but then by that definition, wouldn't certain things, certain brands become a religion? Why isn't Pepsi a religion or Coke a religion? People do make the comparison. It's true. Some people say they drinks Pepsi religiously. They make the comparison, but they don't actually call Pepsi a religion. But it does fit all the criteria that we require. It has an ideology, has an idea, even has a product. And you buy the product, and then you enjoy the product. You can even enjoy it with our friends. And you even stop the debates and everything. Come on, guys. It's as good as religion. Point being is that there's lots of things who would fit a somewhat religious definition, but it's never properly defined. Now, I do have two choices. The original choice, the first choice, well, it's not really two choices as much as they're like they're defined together, so one goes before the other. So the first one is ideology. Ideology is just general philosophy, but the difference between philosophy and ideology is an ideology is multiple philosophies put together as some kind of guide. And so you could have, as an example, if you want to become a carpenter, there's a way to work wood. There's a way to think about working wood. There's a way to think about wood and creating something about wood. Now, it's going to depend on what you do with the wood. If you're trying to create a table, you're not going to think about the wood the same way as you're going to think about if you're trying to do a wood statue. Those are not the same things. In one particular case, in the statue case, you're trying to remove pieces until you get to the statue. So you're trying to figure out how much you should take away. As for if you're building a table, it's more like how flat can I get it? Do I want details? And if you want details, then at that point it looks a little more like sculpting, because yes, at that point you will remove some pieces, but you don't have as much material to play with. And there's usually not as much detail in something like a chair, although you can be very extravagant and decide to create entire faces, which yes, at that point they would become just as complex as creating a statue. Completely true. But you can see that there is some kind of delineation depending on exactly what you're trying to do. If you're building a house which doesn't have any decoration, again, it's a different way of thinking about wood that you wouldn't in creating a sculpture. And that's what an ideology is. It's a combination of philosophies that end up by giving you a way of performing something. And so religion would be an ideology that gives you a set of principles, set of philosophies, which would help you live your life. And so this is where we go back to why do we have the religions that we have today instead of the other ones? Because those are the ones that won. Those are the ideologies, the groups of philosophies that so happened to work. If you've followed some of the things I've said in the past, I do try to make a very specific claim about things that you can experiment on. Things that you can prove in reality. Well, from an evolutionary perspective, you can't prove anything at the moment that the behavior is exhibited. All you can know is that a particular organism has exhibited the behavior. If that organism lives, then that behavior will remain. If that organism dies, then the behavior will be removed. And religion is a set of philosophies, which is a set of behaviors, that's religious ideology. So it does translate to behavior. That's what makes it make sense. That's why it works. If it didn't translate to behavior and it just remained in philosophy, so if it was just an idea and it never exhibited behaviors, then it wouldn't exist today. But because the philosophy then makes you perform behaviors, then it makes sense. Because then you can say, okay, well then, you have this group of people performing certain behaviors and this group of people performing certain behaviors, and if one of them wins, then clearly the other one is going to lose. So they're going to be gone. So the people who did not perform the best behaviors will be gone. It also brings another concept. I don't think I've made a video in this series yet about this, but I do know I've made videos about it. Collectivism. See, religion is a purely collectivist ideology. That's the reason why it's so advantageous. It takes the individual and tells the individual, hey, you matter here. You matter not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. And it's one of those reasons as to why most religions are collectivist. They have to be, because that's what makes them advantageous. If they were not collectivist, then you wouldn't get people to work together. And if they don't work together, well, there's no way for them to be better than another group. So the group that works better together is the group that survives. That's what collectivism is. It's people who work together for, well, some people are gonna, it's not just people who are performing actions together as a collective. No. They have to believe in their collective. Yeah, and they do believe in their collective. That's the whole point of religion. They all believe in their religion. They believe in their collective. They believe that they are working for the grandioseness of not just themselves, but for God. There's a very common theme, mostly in Christianity, where everything you do is for the glory of God. It's a very common theme. There's a reason for that. You're doing it for other people. That's what collectivism is. You're doing it for other people. You're not doing it for yourself. You're doing it for them. Now, some could say, oh, that's altruism. But then every action ends up by being an individual action. So at that point, you'd have to just watch the other video. I explained the whole individualism, collectivism dichotomy. Point being, religion allows us to work together. Now, at first, the first religions weren't as good. They were significantly worse at getting us to work together, and that's why they're gone. The ones that were better at making us work together are the ones that survive. That's why they're here, because they survive. It's also why atheism has this huge problem now, that it's kind of dying off. See, it's not dying off in the sense that the idea is going away. It's dying off in the sense that the people who have adopted the idea can't work together. They've completely become somewhat, if you will, you'd call it, individualists. And then what do? They just claim, oh, well, if everybody was free, if everybody was free, if everybody was free. Yeah, well, if everybody was free, no one would fight for anything. Which means that you would lose to someone else who had a group ideology. And that's exactly what's happening. The atheists are losing to people who have a somewhat, it's just a slightly, you don't need a big collectivist idea, just something that's slightly collectivist will always outbeat the individual. Always, always, always. That's why, over time, this will correct itself. All ideas who do not bring you a better collectivist idea, a better collectivist ideology, religion, will lose. Over time. Now, is it losing today? No, not yet. But over time. Now, we're not going to know if atheism is going to lose over 500, 1,000, 2,000 years. Like, we don't know how it's going to evolve. See, if it finds a collectivist advantage, then it's going to survive. Now, we don't see it right now, or at least the current philosophers of today do not seem to want to change it too much to become collectivist. They seem to be like the idea of collectivism is just, it's disastrous. It's literally what makes people work together. I don't understand what their grand moral posturing is all about this, just because some of them have failed. Somehow everything has to fail now. It doesn't make any sense, okay? Clearly, it has worked pretty well for a very long time. Use what works. Don't self-mutilate just because you think you're superior to the real world. You think that your basic philosophy that's never been tested is somehow just superior. So that's what I would predict for. If atheism was to survive, it needs to become slightly more collectivist. They need to start defending themselves a little more than just, well, that's what reason would suggest. Yeah, it might suggest that, but that doesn't mean that human psychology fits very well with a reason. Yeah, it's a very nice argument, but again, philosophy, reality. Bridge the gap. You have to create a mechanism. Now, the second definition of religion, you could argue that the uniquely identifying characteristic of religion is that it has a worshipping aspect. So you're worshipping something that isn't human, something that is above humans. I could argue better, but usually it's not necessarily better as much as we are subservient, so not necessarily controls us, but watches us, I guess is the way I should put it. Now, I would argue that that's not necessarily fully uniquely identifying. It's because it goes with the mystique, and then you could argue, well, then could ghosts then, if you believe in ghosts, could you then become religious in some weird way? Because you could argue that ghosts shape us, and they're watching over us. Like they fit a lot of the characteristics that would match the idea of a religion. So I do understand that the ghost argument is not a strong argument, but it does kind of fit a lot of the criteria that would be required. And so you could end up with a lot of these weird ideas that would kind of fit in the general mysticism of religion. And so that's why I said that religion, as in terms of just the word religion, doesn't seem to have a proper, uniquely identified character. It seems to be just a special case for an ideology. It's just a special case for an ideology that's gone so big that affects so many people, which is perfectly fine. Look, if people want to use the word, I'm perfectly fine. But it seems odd, since it's hard to say when something is a religion, when something isn't a religion. And people play with the word cult. When it's a small religion, it's a cult. When it's a big religion, then it's a religion. Or that if it's somewhat evil, then it's a cult. But it doesn't make sense. That's exactly the point. It's that it doesn't make. There's no uniquely identifying characteristic. You're defining a gradient, which you can. You can definitely define a gradient, and you could say, well, at this position in the gradient, this will be known as a new name. Perfectly fine. You can do it. It's kind of a waste of words unless you have a special reason for doing this. Like, often it's done simply because of, like, you want to present the effects that something could have. So you could argue that the number of people following a particular ideology could then become religion by just saying, well, since at this size, when they can start to run cities, or they can start to control countries, or they can start to really, be a lot more effective. So that would be perfectly fine. That's a fine threshold. If you can prove that a particular size, the group dynamic completely changes, and it's definitely, now you can see the difference between this size and this size. At 100 people, they couldn't really do anything. It was too hard for them to come together. But at 100,000 people, ooh, this is starting to be the size of a city now. Now they can have conventions, they have enough funding to start companies. You understand? There is definitely a line between certain sizes where you could say there's a difference here. And so I would agree with that. But see, then you can make a rigorous statement. If an organization is large enough or profitable enough to achieve this landmark or this level of organization, then it becomes this, which is not something that religion has. Or at least that's not the way people usually define it. So I'm not against the word, but it would be nice if people were to come up with something that's a little more consistent than just some random unknown size of an ideology that is somewhat loosely related to mysticism. Now, towards the end of this video, some of you might think am I making an argument for religion or against religion. The answer is none. All I'm simply stating is things that work, things that don't work. It so happens to be that religion has worked. I can't tell you exactly why, every single detail at every single place and time as to why it worked. I don't know that. But what I do know is that it did work, because it's here. That's how I know it worked. Same thing as I can't tell you why human beings survived for so long. I don't know. I don't know what happened 5,000 years ago in the middle of wherever. I don't know. But I do know that whomever lived at that place survived, because I'm here and you're here. That's what I know. I know that it's possible because we're here. It's the same thing here. I know that there's something advantageous about it because it survived. And those are the facts. Those are the things we know for a fact. The things we don't know for a fact is what happens if you remove it. We don't know what's going to happen. And so people can be hopeful for something like atheism, but until it's made its mark and it proves that it is psychologically satisfying for human beings and it is functional, in other words, it can beat out other collectivist ideas. Sorry to tell you this, but it might remain as a philosophical idea. Now, some of you may see this at this current time. There are movements which are, even the large philosophers, they do say that they like atheism, but they miss the comfort of religion, and that's it. That's the human psychology part of this. Is that from a human psychological point of view, it's a nice thing. It's a fun thing. It brings you in. It fills you up with love, literally. At least for Christianity specifically, it fills you with joy and love and understanding and a feeling of forwardment, a feeling that you are doing something good for everyone, not just yourself. For everyone. And that's the thing here. That is human psychology. And human psychology will drive people to perform actions. And if you're unwilling to accept that, then whatever you create is going to go down with it. It has to be satisfying to human psychology. Which to some extent brings us back to evolution. That's exactly what makes evolution so odd. Simply because whatever lives, lives. Whatever dies, dies. And so if something like atheism survives human psychology, while humans are not primed for it. So from a purely human psychological point of view, there is a bias towards religion currently. Now clearly that's happened because religion has been part of our lives for so long, that for thousands of years, which means that for successive generations, people who were religious survived. Now, if the idea is dropped and it proves to be at least somewhat advantageous, that means that over time, the people who are capable of living without religion, that can find life enjoyable and to have merit and to be worth living without religion, those people will become more advantageous, assuming religion is dropped. Now, if atheism dies in a couple of years, then that won't happen. But if it survives and there's a population that survives with it, then over time, those people will become more and more satisfied with the idea of atheism. And then at some point, there will be a shift where people will be more comfortable with the idea that there is no God than the people who feel comfortable with the idea that there is a God. But you see, for that to happen, means that it has to survive for a very long time, has to affect successive generations. If it does not affect successive generations, then it won't matter. It'll just go away. So I'm not making a statement of, is it good, is it bad? No. It's a statement of, if it's better, it'll be there. If it is worse, it will not be there. And the purpose of knowledge is to know what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages. So that if you're going to do something like atheism, you have to mimic all the advantages and remove at least one disadvantage. If you've done that, you have a better ideology, a better religion. And so over time, you should survive. Now, if you remove all disadvantages, that's even better. If you increase the number of advantages, that's even better. And that's it. That's the purpose of knowledge, for us to be able to compare advantages and disadvantages and see which ideology, religion, will win out in the end. And if atheism is supposed to be the ideology of intellect, knowledge, science, then clearly they should be able to show what is advantageous about religion and what can be mimicked. Now, I do know that these things are somewhat being talked about. Richard Dawkins has definitely made statements about the advantages of religion, things like bringing people together, allowing communities to talk about their problems, which is something that is completely lost in atheism. Where do you go on Sunday? You don't go anywhere. So you don't talk to anybody. If you don't talk to anybody, you can't present your problems. So you can't fix them. And that might be one of the big reasons as to why we have a spike in depression. Because people don't have a place to go to and feel human with other humans and talk about their problems and talk about what's going well and see what other people are doing. And then you could say, oh, but you just joined a group and a camp. But you have to go there. You have to find those people. Do you like them? Do you not like them? And you have to set it all up. And it costs money. And this is not some simple task. You can't simply state, well, you just do it. You can't just do it. There's a significant cost to this. And if the population doesn't understand that there's a significant cost to this and they don't come together as a collective, as collectivists, then they won't be able to do it. You have to be willing to come together as collectivists. Understand that you have to give up some of your individuality to be able to help everyone around you. You have to give up some of your time, some of your money, together. Anyway, thanks for watching. If at all possible, donate to my Patreon. And a goodbye.